Hey, what's up YouTube? It's been a while. I know I've been pretty lazy when it comes to uploading YouTube videos, but in my last video, it's been 2 months, so it's hard to remember, I mentioned that Michelle had a bike in the mail coming for her, and that bike has arrived. It's right above me. And I've been pretty lazy, so it's taken me a while to actually build this up. It didn't take that long to arrive. But I thought you guys would be interested in how I managed to build up this fully integrated carbon gravel bike, a fairly high-end bike, for less or right around $1,500. Anyways, let's take a look and dive right in. The heart of the build is this VeloBuild gravel frame set. It has the option to be set up with full internal cable routing, which I ended up doing, and in my opinion, it makes the bike just look so good once you finish building it. I had it shipped to Vancouver and it took around 4 weeks for it to arrive, and we paid $479 for the frame, $60 for a custom paint scheme, $155 to ship with the insurance included there, and then $27 service charge. I'm not sure what that was for, but in total it cost $721 for the frame set, including the bar, stem, and seat post. I managed to precariously balance the frame on my scale, and I got a total weight of 1,281 grams for the frame, but this included the headset bearing, seat post clamp, derailleur hangers, and through axles. The fork with an uncut steer weighed at 490 grams. The seat post, which was also uncut, weighed 209 grams, which, keep in mind, I got a small frame, but I think they only make one seat post, so this is the same seat post you would get with an extra large frame. So there was a lot of seat post to cut. The stem and the bar combo weighed in at 428 grams. So overall, it's not super light, but also not super heavy, just mid-pack kind of stuff that you can expect for this kind of price. I ended up going with the 2-piece bar and stem option for easier adjustability, but there was a 1-piece option available for the same price. Straight out of the box, my impressions were that it was packed very well and adequately protected, but I was a bit disappointed by the paint. It felt rough in some spots, almost as if they forgot to do a final bit of sanding, and also there was dirt on the frame when I got it out of the box. For the group set, I ended up going with the Sensa Empire Gravel group set. It's an 11-speed group set. It has a clutch on the rear derailleur, and yeah, that's all there really is to say with it. It's mechanically actuated disc brakes, which I've heard bad things about, but I'll talk about that later. And I ended up paying $300 for it, so pretty good price, cheaper than 105, even cheaper than Tiagra, I believe. And then for the wheels, I just picked up some Alexis Rim Boondock 7Ds. I think these are a pretty popular pair of wheels that are shipped on the Cervelos, the Cervelo Aspero, so you can find them quite easily on the secondhand market. And I also only paid $300 for those, and they actually came with tires as well, so pretty good. So the overall build I was anticipating being fairly easy since it's just a 1x setup, so simpler in the end. The only thing I was slightly concerned about was how hard the internal cable routing was going to be. So the way it works is the cables enter the frame through the handlebars, then go through the stem, down the steerer, and then in through the frame. It's actually easier to explain on the bike. So here, you're going to have to forgive me for the poor camera work and also the poor audio quality. As I mentioned before, it's all through the handlebars, through the stem, through the steer tube, and then all inside. So because we're setting this up 1x, we only have one more cable to run, and that is the rear derailleur. So I think I have enough room to fit it in there. So that's what I will do now. The fit for 3 mechanical cables in the handlebars is pretty tight, so if you were running a 2x system, you may really struggle. Obviously, this isn't an issue at all if you had electronic shifting, but for the price range we're working with, electronic shifting, well, it's not really an option. I was also extra concerned about the brakes because not only had I heard poor reviews on them, but with this internal cable routing, there was a lot of tight bends that the cables were going to have to go through, so I thought that the braking power was actually going to be very weak because of this. In the end, the cable routing didn't take too long to do. I did make a couple of mistakes, so I had to redo it a couple times. The main thing was I didn't realize that there was actually cable guides in the bottom bracket area, so I had to take out the cables and redo that section, but other than that, it was pretty smooth sailing. The bottom bracket area was fine, and the bottom bracket went in a lot easier than it did on my Fredworks, so overall pretty good impression here. It felt like a snug fit, but I haven't ridden it too much, so we don't know if it creaks yet. I had to order a second bottom bracket because the one that came with the Sensa Groupset, it wasn't compatible. And this is the one reservation I have about this frame. I wish it came with a BSA bottom bracket option, just simply because the BSA bottom brackets are so much easier to come by. Like, there's so many available on Facebook Marketplace, and every group set on AliExpress has the option to be shipped with a BSA bottom bracket. Next thing to install was the crankset. I put a bit of Park Tools grease on the part of the crankset that would be in contact with the bearings. I have no clue if this is what you're supposed to do, but this is what I do with all my cranks. The crank works exactly the same as a Shimano Holotech crank, with the splines on the non-drive side and a retention cap, and then 2 clamping bolts. Once the crank was installed, I gave it a bit of a spin test, and from what I can see, it's a pretty good fit and the bearings are pretty smooth. Adjusting the rear derailleur was as simple as any other rear derailleur I've ever worked with. There's just 2 limit screws, the high and low, and then a barrel adjuster to change the tension. So it was pretty much what I'm used to when working with SRAM and Shimano. The one thing I would note is the clamping bolt where you clamp the shifting cable. It's in a bit of an awkward position, and I guess that's just a quality of life thing. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that I haven't really talked about installing the brakes yet, and that's because this is the one place where the frame kind of did let me down. So on the front brake, there's 2 holes where you screw the brake into, and on one of the screws there was a bit of excess carbon covering part of the hole. So as you can see in this poorly filmed video, I had to take a knife to scrape away some of that excess carbon. But once that was done, the brakes went on with no problem, and they were pretty easy to adjust to. So I'm not going to be riding this bike much, obviously, because it's for Michelle, but I did take it out on one test ride after I'd finished building it up, and here are my initial impressions. The Groupset, it not only looks really nice, but it also feels really nice. It feels very similar to my SRAM Red 2012 Groupset, which I have on the Fredworks. The actual shifting mechanism is the exact same pretty much. It feels very clicky, and has a very, it has a premium feel to it. The only thing is when you're in the very smallest gear, the chain is a bit loud, but that's probably the case with most 1x-group sets. Another really impressive thing about this group set for this price is it actually has an adjustable clutch mechanism, so you can change how much tension there is on the chain at any point. The last thing about this group set is the disc brakes, which I was slightly concerned with. I have mechanically actuated disc brake calipers on my mountain bike, which I've just recently bought, and they're just some cheap Shimano calipers, and the disc brake calipers on this bike actually perform better than the ones on that bike, so you can take that for what you want. But obviously it's not as good as a hydraulic disc brake setup. Like, the actual pull of the lever just isn't as smooth, I guess you could say, as with a hydraulic disc group set, and also like there's less modulation essentially. But I think in terms of peak stopping power, it will probably be very similar, and I didn't find the brakes were squishy at all, even with all of the tight bends through the internal cable routing. So now time for my favorite part of the video, where I get to compare the VeloBuild bike, which we've just finished building, to other offerings from other companies. So let's start off with just running through the bikes I'm going to compare it to, and then I'll put a nice chart on the screen so we can make some easy comparisons, and it's easier to see that way. So the first thing we're going to look at is the Canyon Grizl. So Canyon, a very good value brand. They ship direct to consumers. You have to do a bit of building yourself, but overall, if you're looking to buy a bike from a main name manufacturer, you can't really go wrong with Canyon. So the Grizl 6 is their very basic entry-level gravel frame and their gravel build. The Grizl CF SL 7 is a bit higher than the Grizl 6. It's the cheapest carbon fiber offering that Canyon does in the Grizls. So it's also fairly entry level, but pretty good value in my opinion. And then next, let's look at what Specialized has to offer. So Specialized, not really a great value manufacturer in my opinion. Some people are just loyal to the brand, but yeah, I'll hold my thoughts on that. But this is the Diverge E5, so also the very basic entry-level gravel bike that's offered by Specialized. And then the Diverge Sport Carbon is their very entry-level carbon frame that they offer. So let's pull up this chart and see how our VeloBuild fares. These bikes will all perform somewhat similarly. The aluminum bikes are a tad heavier than the carbon bikes, and the only thing I would really point out from my comparison is that the aluminum Specialized has a 2x8 mechanical group set, which I'd say is significantly worse than all the other offerings to a point where you'd actually begin to notice. When it comes to 1x versus 2x, I think that's all personal preference and how you intend to use the bike, so I wouldn't say one is better than the other. One thing I would say that is nice is the Specialized frames are both BSA threaded bottom brackets, whereas to the other offerings are all press fit, which is at the end of the day just a bit more annoying when it comes to looking for parts. All of the frames also have around 50 millimeters of tire clearance. Different manufacturers have different tolerances, so at the end of the day you're going to be able to fit a pretty similar tire into all these frames. The VeloBuild frame actually didn't have an official labeled tire clearance, but when I measured myself, there is 60 millimeters between the seat stays, so I'd say you could pretty easily fit a 50 millimeter tire in there. In terms of additional features, the Specialized carbon fiber bikes have SWAT storage, so the hollow frame, it actually has some openings where you can put like your tools and stuff, and they also have the Future Shock, which is a shock absorber system in the stem to give a bit of extra comfort. And then obviously the VeloBuild has a fully integrated front end, which none of the other frames have. So when it comes to price, it's pretty obvious that the VeloBuild is above and beyond everyone else. You're essentially getting the specs of a full carbon fiber bike that the other manufacturers have to offer at the price of their cheapest aluminum frames. Anyways, that's the end of this week's video. If you guys have any questions about the frame or the build process, feel free to leave a comment. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll also remember to leave links in the description to all the products I use, so you guys can build one of these at home yourself on the cheap. Anyways, I'll see you guys later.